I never thought I'd get this close to perfection. Not the kind of perfection you see on magazine covers or billboards, but the kind that reshapes beauty standards, that defines entire generations of what we find attractive. Let me tell you who I was before that phone call changed everything. My name is Marcus, and I'd been scraping by as a freelance security contractor for 3 years. Not the glamorous kind you see in movies. Mostly warehouse night shifts, construction site monitoring, the occasional corporate event where rich people pretended not to notice the help. My apartment was a studio in Van Nuys, where the walls were thin enough to hear my neighbor's television through the night. I survived on instant ramen and the hope that someday I'd catch a break. A real job, real money, maybe even respect. The security industry in Los Angeles is brutal if you're not connected. Every day, hundreds of guys just like me compete for the same low-paying gigs. Guard a parking lot, watch empty buildings, stand around looking official while event coordinators treat you like furniture. I'd applied to work for celebrity security firms dozens of times, always rejected. Not enough experience, they said. Not the right look, not the right connections. I was starting to think I'd spend my whole life invisible, watching other people live the lives I dreamed about. The call came at midnight on a Tuesday. I was sprawled on my couch, laptop balanced on my chest, scrolling through job listings I'd already applied to twice. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. Desperate people answer every call. "You're needed in Beverly Hills," the voice said. Professional, crisp, no time for pleasantries. Private photo shoot, confidential client, high security clearance required. You'll be briefed when you arrive. My heart started racing. Beverly Hills meant celebrities, real celebrities, big money, the kind of gig that could change everything. "What's the pay rate?" I asked, trying to sound casual while my hands shook. $5,000 for the week, plus bonuses for discretion. $5,000, more than I'd made in the past 2 months combined. I sat up so fast my laptop nearly crashed to the floor. "When do you need me?" "Tomorrow night. I'll send you the address, bring professional attire, and sign the attached NDA. No questions, no exceptions." The line went dead before I could respond. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text containing an address in the Hollywood Hills and a digital contract that made my eyes water. The non-disclosure agreement was 20 pages long and filled with legal language I didn't understand. But the signature line was clear: "Sign here for more money than you've ever made in your life." I signed without reading the fine print. God help me, I signed. When the follow-up text came an hour later, my blood turned to ice water. Client? Heidi Klum. Heidi fucking Klum. The supermodel. The television personality, the woman who'd graced more magazine covers than I could count. The face of perfection itself. I spent the rest of the night Googling everything I could find about her. Her career, her personal life, her recent projects. By dawn, I'd convinced myself this was fate, my big break, the moment my life would finally begin. I had no idea I was researching my own destruction.
The address led me to a mansion that seemed to exist in its own pocket of reality, tucked so deep into the Hollywood Hills that cell phone service flickered in and out. The drive up the winding private road took 15 minutes, past gates that opened silently as I approached, as if the house itself was watching me come. The mansion was beautiful in the way that old Hollywood estates are beautiful, all flowing lines and cream-colored stone, with gardens that looked like they'd been cultivated by artists rather than gardeners. But there was something wrong about it. Something that made my skin crawl the moment I stepped out of my beat-up Honda Civic. Maybe it was the silence. Even in the hills, you expect to hear something. Traffic in the distance, birds, the hum of air conditioning units. But here, the quiet was so complete it felt aggressive, like the house was holding its breath. Or maybe it was the windows. From the outside, they looked black. Not tinted, black. like they'd been painted from the inside or covered with something that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. I stood in the circular driveway for a full minute, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched from those dark windows. This was it, my chance. I wasn't going to let some creepy architecture scare me away from the opportunity of a lifetime. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. A thin man in an expensive charcoal suit greeted me, his smile never reaching his eyes. He was maybe 50, with the kind of pale indoor complexion that suggested he spent most of his time in artificial light. "Mr. Marcus?" His handshape was weak, clammy, and he pulled his hand away quickly. "I'm Jonathan, Miss Klum's assistant. We've been expecting you." The interior of the house was even more unsettling than the exterior. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all of Heidi Klum spanning what looked like her entire career. But something was wrong with them. The lighting was too perfect, the skin too flawless, the eyes too bright and knowing. They looked more like digital art than photographs, as if reality had been carefully edited out and replaced with something artificial. And they were watching. I know how that sounds, but I swear every single photograph tracked my movement as Jonathan led me through the mansion. Eyes that followed, smiles that seemed to widen when I wasn't looking directly at them. "Impressive collection," I said, trying to make conversation. Jonathan didn't respond. He was walking quickly, his expensive shoes clicking against marble floors that reflected our images like dark water. He handed me a key card attached to a retractable cord and a clipboard with a typed list of rules. The paper felt expensive, heavy like legal documents. No personal electronic devices below the main floor. No photography or recording of any kind. No questions about specialized equipment or procedures. No direct interaction with subjects unless specifically authorized. If you witness anything unusual, maintain absolute discretion. Violation of any protocol will result in immediate termination and legal action. "What kind of unusual?" I asked, looking up from the clipboard. But Jonathan was already halfway down the hall, his footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. The staff who remained moved like ghosts. I counted maybe 8 people total in a house that could have easily held 50. Camera assistants with their eyes constantly downcast, lighting technicians who communicated only in whispers, a makeup artist with prematurely gray hair who flinched whenever footsteps approached. Everyone avoided eye contact, not just with me, with each other. Like they were all keeping secrets too dangerous to acknowledge. I tried to introduce myself to a young woman carrying camera equipment, but she shook her head quickly and hurried away. A lighting assistant gave me a brief nod when I asked where I should position myself, then disappeared into another room without a word. The only person who seemed willing to talk was Maria, the makeup artist with the gray hair. I found her in the kitchen, smoking a cigarette by an open window despite the no smoking signs posted everywhere. "First time working for her?" she asked without looking at me. "Yeah. You?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 8 years. 8 years too long. "What do you mean?" She took a long drag from her cigarette and studied my face, like she was trying to decide whether I was worth saving. "Keep your eyes down when the sessions start," she finally said. "Don't stare at the subjects. Don't ask questions about the ones that look different when they leave. And whatever you do, don't let her notice you're thinking too hard." She flicked her cigarette out the window and walked past me without another word. "Wait!" I called after her. "What happens to the subjects?" She paused in the doorway without turning around. "Same thing that happens to all of us eventually. We just feed her in different ways." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with questions I didn't yet understand and a growing sense that I'd made a terrible mistake.
Heidi Klum arrived at exactly 8 p.m., stepping out of a black Mercedes sedan like she'd materialized from shadow itself. Even after decades in the spotlight, even knowing what I know now, I have to admit she was breathtaking. She wore all white, a flowing dress that seemed to move independently of any breeze, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves that caught the last rays of sunset. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that stopped everyone in their tracks. It was her presence, a gravitational pull that made every person in the vicinity straighten up and take notice. The entire house transformed when she walked through the door. The silence that had felt oppressive before now felt expectant, dangerous, like the calm before a storm that would reshape the landscape. "Good evening," she said to the assembled staff. Her German accent made each word sound deliberate, calculated. When she smiled, I felt something cold run down my spine. Her smile was perfect, but it felt practiced, like something she'd refined in mirrors until it became a precision instrument. She moved through the mansion like she owned not just the building, but the very air inside it. Staff members who had been invisible suddenly materialized to take her coat, her purse, to offer her refreshments she declined with small gestures. "Everything prepared?" she asked Jonathan. "Yes, Miss Klum. The basement setup is complete. The first subject is ready." That's when I noticed it for the first time. No one said basement directly. They gestured downward, say the lower level, or the studio below, or simply point toward the floor, as if speaking the word might summon something they didn't want to face. "Bring him down in 10 minutes, she instructed. "I want to inspect the equipment first." She disappeared down a staircase I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind what I thought was a decorative wall panel. Jonathan followed, then Klaus the photographer, then 2 assistants carrying cases full of equipment I couldn't identify. I was left alone with Maria and 2 lighting technicians, who immediately busied themselves with tasks that seemed designed to avoid conversation. "What's down there?" I asked Maria. She was arranging makeup brushes with obsessive precision. "You'll see." 20 minutes later, they brought down the first subject. His name was Derek, and he was exactly the kind of person you'd expect to find at a high-end photo shoot, maybe 23 years old, with the kind of natural beauty that belonged on magazine covers. Perfect bone structure, bright hazel eyes, a confident smile that suggested he'd never encountered a problem he couldn't charm his way through. He was excited, nervous, but excited. This was Heidi Klum, a legend, a career-making opportunity. "I can't believe this is actually happening," he said to Klaus as they walked toward the hidden staircase. "I mean, Heidi Klum. My mom is gonna freak out when I tell her." Klaus smiled tightly and didn't respond. The basement wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined a converted space, maybe a little cramped, with standard photography equipment. Instead, I found myself in something that looked like a photography studio crossed with a medical facility. The space was enormous, with white walls, white floors, and white ceiling that seemed to stretch higher than should have been possible given the house's architecture. But the most unsettling thing was the lighting, not the photography lights. Those were positioned around the edges like you'd expect. I'm talking about the ambient lighting that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, making everything look sterile and cold. The cameras weren't standard equipment. They were massive, old-fashioned machines that looked more like medical devices than photography gear. The main camera was easily 6 feet tall, with a lens that looked like it belonged on a telescope rather than a camera. Thick cables snaked across the floor connecting to machines I couldn't identify, some humming with electricity, others pulsing with lights that followed patterns I couldn't understand. But the strangest thing was the silence. Despite all the equipment, despite the electrical hum, the basement felt quieter than the house above, like the sound itself was being absorbed by something. Derek noticed it too. His confident smile faltered as Klaus positioned him under the main lights. "This is some serious equipment," he said, trying to maintain his earlier enthusiasm. "Is this like cutting-edge technology or something?" "Something like that," Klaus replied, not meeting his eyes. When Heidi descended the stairs, the entire atmosphere changed. The air grew thicker, heavier. The lights seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, and Derek's confident smile began to waver. "Look at me," Heidi commanded softly, as she positioned herself behind the main camera. "Only at me." The camera clicked, Not the quick snap of modern digital equipment, but a deep, mechanical sound that seemed to echo from inside the machine itself. The flash wasn't the bright white you'd expect, it was something else. A deep, hungry light that seemed to drink the color from everything it touched. Derek blinked confused. That felt strange. "That's normal," Heidi said, making minute adjustments to the camera's position. "Look at me again." Click, flash. This time, Derek stumbled slightly. I watched his perfect skin grow noticeably paler, his bright hazel eyes less vibrant. But Heidi only smiled and repositioned herself for another angle. "I feel dizzy," Derek said, raising his hand to his forehead. "The lights can be overwhelming," Heidi replied calmly. "Just a few more shots. Look at me." What I witnessed over the next hour was the most disturbing transformation I'd ever seen. With each photograph, Derek changed. His skin grew wan and papery. His hair lost its shine and started to thin at the temples. The confident energy that had made him perfect for modeling simply drained away like water flowing out of a broken container. But Heidi grew more radiant with each shot. Her skin glowed with an inner light. Her hair shimmered like spun gold. Her smile became more dazzling, her eyes more brilliant. She was feeding on him somehow, drawing his youth and vitality into herself through that impossible camera. By the 20th shot, Derek could barely stand. He kept blinking like he was trying to focus on something just out of reach. "I don't feel well," he mumbled. "Can we take a break?" "We're almost finished," Heidi said, and her voice had taken on a quality I can only describe as satisfied, like a predator that had cornered its prey. The final photograph was the worst. When the camera clicked and that hungry light flashed, Derek aged 20 years in an instant. His face sagged, his hair turned gray at the temples, his bright eyes became dull and lifeless. Heidi lowered the camera and smiled with genuine pleasure. "Perfect. We're done here." Derek swayed on his feet. Klaus had to catch him before he fell, helping him to a chair where he sat staring at nothing with hollow, empty eyes. "Have him taken to recovery," Heidi instructed, already heading for the stairs. Two assistants helped Derek stand. He moved like a sleepwalker, his face blank, his body moving with the careful uncertainty of someone much older. When they passed me on their way to the staircase, I got a close look at his face. It wasn't Derek anymore. Not really. The features were the same, but everything that had made him vital, attractive, alive, it was gone, sucked away by that terrible camera and transferred to the woman who was already planning her next session.
Over the next 3 days, I watched the same horrific process repeat 6 more times. Beautiful people arrived at the mansion, perfect specimens of humanity with bright eyes, confident smiles, and futures full of possibility. Models, actors, influencers, even a few ordinary people who just happened to be stunning. And one by one, Heidi drained them. The pattern never varied. They'd arrive excited, nervous, honored to work with the legendary Heidi Klum. Jonathan would brief them briefly, Klaus would escort them to the basement, and then the feeding would begin. Not their blood or their physical health, at least not directly. Something deeper, something that made them who they were. Their life force, their vitality, their very essence absorbed into her eternal image through that impossible camera. Each session left her more perfect, more radiant, more untouchable. And each subject left as an empty shell of their former self, if they managed to leave at all. Some didn't make it upstairs. I'd find them hours later, sitting in corners of the basement, staring at nothing with vacant expressions. The staff would eventually escort them out through a back entrance I hadn't noticed before, but their eyes never regained focus. They moved through the world like sleepwalkers, beautiful corpses animated by muscle memory alone. Sarah was an Instagram influencer with 2 million followers and a smile that could sell anything. After her session, she couldn't remember her own name. Miguel was a dancer from Spain with the kind of natural grace that seemed choreographed by angels. When they helped him upstairs, he walked like an old man with arthritis. Jasmine was a college student who'd won a modeling contest. She entered the basement laughing at Klaus's nervous jokes and left speaking in monotone whispers about nothing at all.
I started keeping a mental count. 7 subjects in 3 days. 7 bright, beautiful souls reduced to hollow echoes of themselves. And with each feeding, Heidi became more luminous, more magnetic, more impossibly perfect. The staff pretended not to notice. They'd developed a collective blindness that let them function in proximity to horror. They'd help position the subjects, adjust the lighting, clean the equipment afterward, but their eyes stayed down, their conversations stayed professional, their silence stayed absolute. I couldn't maintain that willful blindness. Every time I watched that camera flash and saw another person diminish, something inside me recoiled, but I also couldn't look away. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion, horrific but mesmerizing. On the 3rd night, after a particularly brutal session with a young actor named Tony who'd left speaking in childlike sentences, Klaus cornered me in the upstairs hallway. His hands were shaking worse than usual, and his face had the gray pallor of someone who hadn't slept in days. "You see it, don't you?" he whispered, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "What she does to them." I nodded, unable to speak. "I've been her photographer for 18 years, he said, his voice cracking with exhaustion and something deeper, guilt maybe, or shame. "I've watched it happen hundreds of times, maybe thousands. She calls them subjects, but they're really offerings, sacrifices to her eternal beauty." He looked around nervously, then pulled me into an empty room and closed the door. "It started small," he continued, "little sessions here and there, models who left looking tired. I told myself it was the lights, the stress, the long hours. But then I started noticing patterns. The ones who worked with her aged faster than they should have. Their careers stalled. Their beauty faded in ways that didn't make sense." He rolled up his sleeve, showing me his arm. The skin was mottled, aged like old photograph paper left in sunlight. But worse than that, I could see something moving underneath. Shadows that shifted and writhed like living things. I tried to leave once, after I realized what she was really doing, but she convinced me to stay. One final session, just for old time's sake. She said she wanted to capture my artistic essence for posterity. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "A piece at a time, that's how she keeps her team loyal. Just enough of our life force to make us dependent, not enough to kill us. Yet, we're living batteries, slowly draining ourselves to power her immortality." He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes wild with desperation. "But you're different. She's noticed you, the way you watch, the way you think. She likes curiosity in her victims. It makes the extraction more potent. She's going to offer you something soon, a chance to be part of something eternal." "What kind of offer?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "She'll want to photograph you, to capture your essence in her private collection. And when she does," he shuddered, "when she does, you'll understand why the subjects never really leave. Part of them stays in those photographs forever, trapped, conscious, aware." Before I could ask what he meant, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Klaus dropped his hands and stepped back. "Remember, when she makes the offer, try to say no, even though you won't be able to, even though she'll make it impossible to refuse." The door opened, and Jonathan appeared with his usual emotionless expression. "Miss Klum would like to see you, in the basement, now." Klaus gave me one last desperate look before Jonathan led me away.
The basement felt different when I descended alone. The machines hummed with a different rhythm, more urgent somehow. The lights pulsed in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. And in the center of it all, Heidi stood beside her impossible camera, more radiant than I'd ever seen her. She'd just finished a session. I could smell the ozone in the air, see the residual energy crackling around the equipment. Whatever she'd taken from her latest subject had left her practically glowing with stolen vitality. "Marcus," she said, and hearing my name in her voice made my chest tighten. "You've been very professional these past few days. Very
Observant. I tried to keep my voice steady. Just doing my job, ma'am. She smiled, an expression of genuine warmth that was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. Your job, she repeated. Yes, I suppose that's one way to look at it. But I think we both know you've seen something here that goes beyond simple security work. She moved closer and I caught her scent. Something expensive and floral, but underneath that something metallic, like copper pennies or old blood. Tell me, Marcus, what do you think happens in this room? The question hung in the air between us. I knew she wanted honesty, but I also knew that honesty might be the last thing I ever gave freely. I think you're stealing something from those people, I said. Their youth, their beauty, their life. She laughed, a sound like silver bells with an edge that could cut. Stealing, she said. Such an ugly word for something so beautiful. I prefer to think of it as redistribution. These people have something I need, something they're wasting on ordinary lives. I simply put it to better use. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out something that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was a camera, but not like the massive machine that dominated the room. This was smaller, more personal, yet somehow infinitely more terrifying. Looking at it was like staring into a void that had learned to hold the shape of a camera. The lens didn't reflect light, it absorbed it, creating a darkness so complete it hurt to look at directly. The body of the camera seemed to shift and writhe when I wasn't looking straight at it, like it was made of liquid shadow rather than metal and glass. Do you know what this is? She asked, holding it like a sacred artifact. I shook my head, transfixed by the impossible wrongness of the thing. This is how it all began. My first camera. Not the first one I owned, the first one that showed me what true beauty costs. Her fingers caressed its surface with the tenderness of a mother touching her sleeping child. It found me in 1992, during a shoot in Berlin. Such an ordinary day, such an extraordinary gift. She raised the camera, and I could hear mechanisms moving inside it that didn't sound like any machinery I'd ever heard. More like breathing or heartbeats. The lens focused on me with a mechanical word that sounded like whispers in a language I didn't recognize. Beauty fades, Marcus. Youth disappears. Talent withers. But what if it didn't have to? What if you could capture it, preserve it, redistribute it to where it would do the most good? My mouth had gone completely dry. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but my body felt rooted to the floor by the weight of her presence. I could take it by force, she said softly, reading my conflict in her face. But it's better when it's given freely, more nourishing. The subjects who resist provide sustenance, but the ones who submit provide transcendence. The camera pulsed more urgently, like it could sense my weakening resolve. Look at me, Marcus. Really look. Do you see someone who has wasted the gifts she's been given? Do you see someone who has squandered the beauty that flows through her? And God help me, I looked. I saw the impossible perfection of her face, unmarked by age or stress or any of the things that mark ordinary people. I saw the radiance that seemed to emanate from within, the glow that made cameras love her and audiences worship her. I saw immortality made flesh, and I wanted it. Do you want to be part of something eternal? My throat worked silently for a moment. When I finally found my voice, it came out as barely a whisper.
Yes.
She smiled then, an expression of pure satisfaction, and raised the camera to her eye. "Then look at me," she commanded. "Only at me. Let me capture who you really are." The camera clicked with that same deep mechanical sound I'd heard dozens of times over the past 3 days. But this flash was different, darker, more personal, more invasive than anything the big machine had produced. It reached inside me with tendrils of hungry light and pulled something vital away. I felt it leaving me, not my memories or my thoughts, but something deeper. The part of me that questioned, that wondered, that saw patterns others missed. The essence of who I was flowing out through my eyes and into that impossible lens. The pain wasn't physical, it was existential. The agony of becoming less than yourself, of feeling your soul stretch and thin and finally snap as it was torn away from everything that anchored it to your body. I stumbled, suddenly dizzy and weak. The basement spun around me and I had to grab a nearby equipment stand to keep from falling. Heidi lowered the camera, studying me with the satisfaction of an artist who had just completed her masterpiece. "Not all of it," she said calmly, slipping the terrible camera back into her bag. "Just the parts I needed. Your curiosity, your perception, your ability to see truth. The rest you can keep, for now." I looked down at my hands. They were paler than they'd been, older. I could feel something missing inside me, a hollowness where my sense of wonder used to live. "Welcome to my family, Marcus. Klaus will explain the rest of your duties. You'll find the work much easier now that you're invested in the outcome." She paused at the bottom of the staircase and looked back at me. "Oh, and don't worry about the aging. It only progresses when you try to leave. As long as you stay loyal, as long as you serve your purpose, you'll remain functional." Her footsteps echoed up the stairs, leaving me alone in that sterile white basement with the knowledge of what I'd become and what I'd lost. That was 6 months ago. I've been living in the mansion ever since, part of Heidi's permanent staff. The work isn't difficult. We rarely get intruders, and when we do, they usually leave without asking too many questions. Mostly, I just make sure the subjects don't try to leave before their sessions are complete. Sometimes I have to help carry the ones who can't walk afterward. The hardest part is the knowing. Watching beautiful, vibrant people walk through that door, knowing they'll leave as hollow shells. Knowing that their beauty, their youth, their very essence will become part of her eternal perfection. Knowing that part of them will be trapped forever in photographs that will outlive us all. She's scheduled for 3 magazine covers next month, a Fashion Week appearance in Paris, a television special about her timeless beauty secrets. The world will worship her, never knowing the cost. Sometimes, late at night, I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I look older than I should, more tired, but not as bad as Klaus, who's been here 18 years, or Maria, whose hair went completely gray after she tried to quit last year. We are all slowly giving our lives to preserve her immortal image, feeding her perfection one piece at a time. The subjects keep coming. Young, beautiful, full of life and hope and dreams. They arrive excited for the opportunity to work with the legendary Heidi Klum. They leave as hollow shells if they remember to leave at all. And Heidi grows more perfect with each session, more radiant, more untouchable, more eternal. When people ask me what it's like working for her, I smile and say it's an honor. That's easier than explaining that her ageless beauty isn't genetics or expensive treatments or the result of healthy living. It's built on a foundation of stolen souls, captured in photographs that will never fade because the lives inside them never escape. Heidi will go on. She'll grace magazine covers for decades to come. She'll be the face of elegance and sophistication until the end of time. People will study her as the pinnacle of ageless beauty, never understanding the real source of her power.
Because no matter how many photo shoots she does, no matter how many cameras capture her perfect image, none of it compares to the real truth. Her beauty isn't maintained by her lifestyle or her genetics. It's maintained by theft, by a camera that captures more than light, by souls like mine, trapped forever in frames we'll never escape, forever feeding her eternal perfection. Forever.